Hey guys, welcome to Biomassed episode 77. We're glad you could tune in for a early episode. As we talked about last week, I've been doing a haunted house during the nighttime hours during the month of October. So they were kind enough to push the time back a bit so I could do it today. I'm not sure what the plan is next week, but yeah, thanks for tuning in a little bit early today. I believe we're on episode 77. Probably a bit of a lean show today, not a whole lot going on. We'll probably talk a bit about EVE Vegas and the changes that they discussed there for mine, as well as some updates on EVE Valkyrie. I did not personally watch it yet, so we'll probably be going to Zell and some others that actually did watch the keynotes to talk about that. But kind of a free-flowing episode after that, and yeah, we'll hopefully keep this one pretty short because I will have to run off to make people scream in the near future here. So without much further ado, let's start with some introductions at the top with Zaria Zell.
I'm Zaria Zell. I was on the CPM. I now am here on this podcast, and sometimes I write blog articles.
Fantastic, Earth.
Hi, I'm Darth Carbonite, member of CPM2, and glad to be here tonight.
We appreciate you showing
This
up.
afternoon.
All right.
It's not really tonight.
Well, it depends on what time zone you're in, because it's like midnight for Zaria or something, right?
Don't be time racist, Zell.
All right. Heracles Porsche.
Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Heracles Porsche here, alcoholic, YouTuber, and some other random adjective.
Awesome. And Jadek Menaheim.
Jadek here. I am the manager of the Trello Trade Channel and the Audit Mistress profile.
Awesome. And Zaria.
I'm Zaria. I'm a member of CPM2, and I also am glad that Darth is here.
She just loves his sexy voice. And I'm Pokey Draven from OSG Planetary Operations. I obviously help host the podcast here. I write sometimes for our blog, and I'm a general spreadsheet warrior. So we'll get started. We actually have two CPM members here. There's, from my understanding, not a whole lot to talk about, but anything for a CPM update you guys can fill us in on?
Zaria, go.
No, you go.
I'll go.
Who's
Not a
on
whole
first?
We've got the event, but that's old news. The cool thing is that we have a sharp uptick in activity because of the event. I guess lots of people want those respecs. And with that have come a lot of people trying to cut corners and boost.
Well, we don't. The event's new from the last podcast, though, right?
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, anyone who doesn't know, it's 514 kills, gets you a free respec and 21 wins. What is that? The skin, a Marlight skin, and you have until the 29th to do it.
Yeah.
And there you have people. Heracles Porsche is the 8th member of the CPM.
Basically. Is there an honorary CPM title?
Not really, but let's talk.
If there was, Pokey would have it.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that.
I'm sorry. I was being rude.
No, it's fine. I don't think I can't really go into details because we don't actually have the details yet. But I guess it's not that big of a deal to say that we're probably going to have our next official meeting with actual CCP devs, actual sit down proper meeting soon, because that's part of the whole CPM process. So hopefully once we've had that meeting, there'll be something concrete to show for it. But like I said, we don't know any details yet, so I can't really go into what that meeting would even be about.
Awesome. So obviously we just had the 3.1 update, and I know that when we had Rattati on the show a few weeks ago, he was talking about how you guys kind of came in, you had a wish list of things you wanted to get done. We kind of compiled the list, and you put together some good numbers and whatnot. And they got that pushed out pretty well, and so far it's been fairly positive from what I've seen people talking about. Do you guys have additional things that you're looking to push next, or are you just kind of seeing how the dust settles, or what's going on?
I think one of the things that kind of train of thought just completely disappeared. The experimental lab change was kind of left over from some of the things we talked about even prior to the hotfix, and that was now implemented fairly recently. So it's an ongoing process. Not all of it happens in like a big, massive update. Some of it just kind of, it's an ongoing thing.
And
Right.
on the experimental warbarge topic, we were very impressed with how, dare I say, mature the forums and the community in general were about that, the removal, the just passive drip of officer weapons. It wasn't healthy.
I think even the people that were, taking full advantage of that and running multiple accounts to get that passive flow going were acutely aware that it was not healthy for the game and it was causing serious issues. I mean, I've talked to a few people that have stockpiled a large amount and haven't been pushing them to the market, but very well could because it's so bad. So I think that's a positive change for everybody, even those who enjoy using officer weapons.
Yeah, thank you guys for getting that done, by the way.
Yeah, it needed to be done. Who knows what we'll be able to do in the future, but it's a short stopgap measure.
I mean, I sank a pretty good chunk of, Aurum and time into my warbarge experimental labs, but I'm just like, it doesn't bother me at all because like the amount of officer in this game is ridiculous. So yeah, I totally support it.
Yeah, it's been a point of rage for me recently. For those of you who frequent the Skype channel, I every so often go on a fit screaming about various things. It's usually the officer gear as of late. So yeah, I think we're all very happy to see that.
So I think the one thing that would make Pokey even happier about the state of the game would be the introduction of officer grenades.
Well, officer grenades and officer milestones, which allow people to go into orbit and then come down with small nuclear warheads in hand. I think that would probably be it would be fun, right? People would say, "Oh, we feel like super
fun.
soldiers because we have handheld nukes and can fly a mile in the air."
It's that F word again.
That fucking F word.
Fun. But yeah, after that announcement and like removal of officer gear, the prices certainly spiked in the trade channels. Like you've got gear going up from what usually was like 100k, 200k to now 500, 800. Or yeah, it's just it's ballooned quite a bit.
Well, that's insane. It'll be interesting to see where that price actually settles down to once people get used to the new flow.
Yeah, it's pretty reactionary at the moment.
That's good, though. I mean, the fact that you were seeing that much in any match, pubs especially, was just absurd. I mean, for those of you who play EVE Online, officer gear is, it's a big deal. It's not something you would just kind of throw around willy-nilly in most cases.
Oh, do they have officer on EVE?
Oh, yeah. No, there's...
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there's officer, there's pirate, there's Dead Space stuff. There's a lot more tiers of gear in EVE, and it's extremely powerful stuff, but also extremely expensive. So you don't see it very often in normal play unless you're doing some high end stuff.
Make for
and
great
it's
kill
a lot
maze.
funnier when it dies.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
There's some hilarious kill mails in in EVE. Yeah, you can go on for days about the crazy shit that people lose and the dumb stuff they were doing when they lost it. So obviously, you can't talk about what is going in next, but from a personal standpoint, as CPM members, what would you like to see happen to the game in following updates? It not confirming that it's going to be in there or not, but just as a person, as a player, what would you like to see?
Go ahead, Darth. You can go first.
2 minute count. Let's see. Like,
I guess I'd ask the ones that are most feasible under the current situation.
Probably continued refinement of this warbarge thing. It sure would be nice to have more subsystems, or even just have it work correctly. It's
here.
Yeah, I got punked when I bought Subsystem 6, so that'd be nice.
I've got a question. Some people looking into it where Toddy might have said this a long time ago in passing. But there's a 5% cap on the experimental ammo munitions lab. So like a cap on your damage that you can do, even though you can keep upgrading it.
Yeah.
There is a cap.
As far as I know, yes. The levels above 5 don't do a thing, and that's horrible.
Oh my.
That's really? Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, past level 4, you're basically wasting any Aurum or components you have. Well, crap.
That's yet another example of one of those things where I have no words.
But the whole warbarge thing was supposed to be refined a lot more and more quickly after it was put out.
Absolutely.
But we're still waiting on lots of the features that we expected.
Well, especially since that's supposed to kind of be the key feature of Warlords, the whole series of expansion, that you would think that they would be focusing a bit more on it, because in the state it currently is, in my personal opinion, with the passive nature of everything. I mean, we saw that with the officer weapons, but I mean the effective passive gains has been seen before, and the effects will probably be seen in the future. And I think that they need to take some time to really look at that and decide on how they want this to work, because I think the officer weapons is just one of the ultimate symptoms of the base problem, and I think they really need to adjust that and make it work properly, as you said.
Yep.
And of course, I've still been screaming about the whole in-battle benefit with the damage bonus, but I think that they aren't going to get rid of it, unfortunately.
They did cap it, though.
That's true, but I worry about if they expand the system and allow you to level that further, that they'll add other benefits that will help you in battle, which I'm, again, not a fan of, because it is a pretty steep wall to get past, especially if you're a new player.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who was there for the time when the warbarge was drafted, I think we expected a lot more to do with it than what we got in the short term, and it didn't really go much further than that in this period of time. So
yeah, and that might be something worth starting a feedback thread on, either from a developer or from a CPM, to discuss with people. How do you feel about the warbarge? What do you like about it? What do you not like? What sort of changes do you think need to be made, especially in light of this change to the experimental factory? What is not working properly, and what can we do to make it more enjoyable and engaging for the players? Because currently it's kind of still. I mean, they made it better with initial changes when it first came out, but it's still fairly unexciting. It's just something you log in and click, and that's the end of it.
I think Aeon still has his thread going on that.
On the experimental lab specifically, I believe.
Yeah, but it didn't include warbarge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think an overarching discussion would be important.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, obviously, gathering player feedback on that is, of course, important. The thing with it is that, it's not quite the same as getting player feedback on things like which weapons are underperforming or overperforming, and what specifically could be tuned about them to make the situation better, because those are things that are already they're features that are already present in the game and can just be kind of fiddled with, alter things slightly. Whereas if you start going all insane about like these mad ideas about how you wanted the warbarge to actually work, yes, that's all great, throwing ideas out there, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's some sort of a understanding of a lot of it's just not going to happen. Even if it's the greatest idea in the world, it's just probably going to be too much of a word, can't think of it. I mean, it's too much resource intensive for it to happen, particularly in the short term. So I mean, I don't know, the brainstorming on that seems to be a little bit misguided, maybe.
But we do have our ideas, and the community will be involved whenever we decide to move forward with it.
Yeah, yes, obviously. I mean, it's more in the sense that I would like it would make more sense for those ideas to come from things that we know are at least somewhat plausible, from coming from Furtati, what he says, that's actually something that can be done, and then talking to the community about the specifics, rather than, hey, give us all sorts of great ideas that we know probably can never be done. I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm a little bit too down to earth sometimes.
But it's all about filtering, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when I say a discussion, I mean obviously one that's a bit more focused, not completely open-ended. And like Darth said, that a large function of the CPM is to provide key points for a more focused discussion, and then also provide a filtering process to, in a way that you've got a million ideas, and you can typically group similar ideas into something that's kind of the medium amongst all of them, and then present those ideas.
It's obviously it just helps to kind of set the focus already when you start the discussion, when you have some sort of idea of what's actually feasible and what isn't, as opposed to just blindly fishing. I mean, you might catch something awesome, but you're also going to spend a lot of time just
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I mean by a more focused discussion. Like, here's a couple ideas we're thinking about. What do you guys think? How can you, what are your thoughts on modifying these ideas? And then we'll let you know if it's feasible or not. So I think we're on the same page there. But anyways, so for those of you who were not aware, EVE Vegas is an event that obviously takes place in Vegas around this time every year. I actually was there 2 years ago when they had the whole laser focus presentation, which was bitterly hilarious. But regardless, I personally have not watched those videos, but I believe it's actually moved from a player run event to a CCP run event now, if I'm correct.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So there was obviously a bunch of keynotes there, nothing on DOS or anything of the sort, obviously. But they did talk about EVE Online, and we'll touch on that briefly, and then also EVE Valkyrie. And again, I personally didn't watch it, but I know Zell and a couple others in here did. So
I watched the Valkyrie.
Zell, do you want to kind of start off and talk about? Okay, well, let's start off with Valkyrie, since that's probably what most of our listeners would be more familiar with rather than EVE Online. So what did they talk about? I know there was some mention of customization and whatnot.
So there was this moment, and when the marketing people are up talking, you can kind of tell. You hear a lot of buzzwords. The immersion buzzword was dropped. And there was actually a moment where I thought they were going to go full Star Citizen, because they started talking about how it was 3 or 4 minute match arcade shooter, which is great and people enjoyed it, but how they wanted to go for something further and get something more, do something more, and something more long term. And it sounded like they were going to kind of go off the deep end with what otherwise is a pretty good game in the limits of what it is. But and I was ready to just start cackling wildly, but unfortunately for my humor, they did not do that. Their big announcement was that they're kind of working on some different kind of different hulls for the ships. So you have your base model ship, and then there's kind of a progression of modifications you can make to that ship, which was kind of their big thing. And of course, being CCP, the other big thing that they showed off was the fact that Valkyrie will have skins. And then they went, skins, shocker. So then the other thing that they went into was into the lore, because they just released the first of the Valkyrie comics that kind of sets up the storyline. And I think it's Round, I think is how it's pronounced, is kind of the lead character, who's voiced by Katie Sackhoff, which they make sure to remind everyone of regularly, because I'm assuming she's not cheap to hire. But and then so they were talking about her story a bit, and then they said that every hero needs a villain, and so they needed to and they did this kind of big dramatic reveal intro for a character that honestly I'm not sure. They didn't say who voiced it, but it sounded very familiar. It sounded someone suggested it was like the voiceover for Bastion. This is a very deep, gravelly voice. I'm positive I recognize it from a few places.
Like Bastion or Starhawk or
it's whoever it is. He does a bunch of other a bunch of video game voiceovers. But I guess so. There's this character that was supposedly dead in EVE lore called Fatal, and they really tried to drum this up and be like, oh my gosh, we brought Fatal back, and there was silence in the room because no one knew what it was, because no one cares about their lore that much. It didn't seem like it seemed like he was the guy on stage seemed overly enthusiastic for something that nobody really got. But they detailed the story.
So now I haven't been following Valkyrie. Right. So is Valkyrie going to be free to play with skin microtransactions, or is it going to actually be a purchased?
They have not
title?
announced that at all.
That's been announced.
They haven't said anything, have they? As far as purchase versus,
Not that I know.
I don't think they have. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did something like where it was, a partnered up with buying, your Oculus Rift or your Morpheus or whatever, where it came with the device as a pack-in, but then they also sold skins and stuff on top of that, something like that. I don't know. We're all just guessing right now.
Yeah, well, CCP and communication and all that stuff, but hopefully they aren't making too many promises that are unrealistic, like we've seen many times before. I think at the very least, my expectation of Valkyrie is something that's going to be very cool, because I've played the tech demo. It's very, very cool, but I'm not expecting some grand overarching saga like I was with Dust or anything like that. I think it'll be a fun kind of lobby dog shooter or dogfighter rather, with some of course CCP lore and customization and whatnot. And I think that if they can deliver that and make it a really solid experience and not go too crazy with trying to make it be massive, I think it'll be a really solid title.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be their first test of really, their new motto of really just trying to make a great independent game, and then maybe see if they can tie it in later if it makes sense.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, for those of you who've played EVE, you know that a real-time game like Valkyrie probably is not going to be able to be synced directly with space battles in EVE, just by the nature of how EVE works, and time dilation gets confusing and all that.
They did announce, however, some really, really big changes that didn't really come off with a lot of fanfare, but the whole Brain in the Box initiative that they've been working on is going to be released next week, and that's essentially really massive for how they handle big fleet battles and transitioning between different states and jumping through gates. It's going to be a lot faster loading for people.
Now, is that something you can give us a quick rundown on what that actually means, Brain in the Box, that's not too techy?
I believe how they would how it would work is I think you, as your character in EVE, your character assets and traits are always calculated with you in like the instance of the place in space you're at, and it puts a lot of load on the server when there's multiple people in there, because it has to calculate all of your traits. So what they do is they remove that to a separate server, so it reduces the load on the server for calculating all of your character attributes. So it's like a complete rewrite of the underlying script for EVE.
Well, that should definitely be good for those who are involved in a lot of those big fleet battles where you have a ton of people in system, or even day traders who are going to JITA and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, performance fixes are always good. It's obviously something we would love to see in Dust, because there's a lot of underlying code issues that have been causing problems.
Dust is also moving to a new server node, or the EVE server node. We'll see how that turns out. Like 2016, we're moving over to that.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be nice, because, I mean, from my experience, my internet connection is usually quite good, and I've rarely experienced a lot of lag in games, but it's been getting progressively worse in terms of lag and stability within Dust itself, so I can only imagine it's something more server-side that's degrading or having issues, so hopefully this change will help improve that, at least to some degree.
Kind of funny enough, that's been one of the only announcements on Dust that we've had. I mean, technically Dust will still be here, right? In 2016.
I mean, the thing is, that was in the EVE patch notes, right? About the Tranquility updates.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, TQ updates, I'm sure they're absolutely necessary, and that's, they're updating the whole thing. That's why Dust is also affected. But I mean, I don't think the lag you're suffering in battles is really tied to Tranquility in all that much, because the battle servers are really probably more important in that.
Yeah,
TQ is it's more just your attributes.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, it integrates for all of our chat and our corporation data, and any statistics on our characters, our skill points. That's all routed through Tranquility, but that's all like pretty simple values. There's nothing that on the extent of like bullet trajectories and stuff. All everything that actually happens in combat is dealt with on battle services. And as far as I know, I think pretty much everything from Tranquility is calculated out ahead of the battle starting, I think.
I mean, the only thing I can see might have some effect on the chats. But I mean, I don't think that's going to actually make a difference in battle. But I mean, I'm not a technical expert. That's just my understanding of how it works.
Well, that's good to know, though. I mean, I didn't want to set any expectations that it was going to, fix everything or cause considerable improvements. But it, at the very least, it is good to know that the word dust showed up in an EVE, patch notes, because it is still tied to the servers, and I don't know. Well, like Darth said, at least you know that the game is existing past the end of the year, which is always nice. It would just be good to have more details, but I'm not going to sit here and gripe. Was there anything else on Valkyrie, Zal, or was that pretty much it?
I think that was pretty much all of it.
Okay, yeah, because I'll need to go take a look at the keynotes. I have not had time because of everything going on. So I do know that there is a new EVE update. We won't go too deep down the rabbit hole with it, but it is, some of the images I saw were pretty freaking cool. The update's being called EVE Citadel because it's the update where they release the citadels, which, from my understanding, are extremely large player structures that are built. Now, Zal, you might know, what purpose do these citadels hold in
Effectively, long term, they're going to replace outposts entirely. They have a lot of redundant functionality with outposts, but from what I understand, a lot of things, including outpost code, is like stuff that was designed, at least 8 years ago, that no one there knows how it works or how to fix it. And I think CCP is also really afraid to touch things that are already out there in a lot of cases. So they said, I think what happened was they said, okay, so we want to redesign how structures work. Messing with the ones people already have is going to cause a lot of breakage when we do it. So I think they're really just producing the new version of Outposts, and then they're going to phase out the old ones. Because, they work a bit differently, but they're basically the same thing. And they get to mitigate questions of, well, you're wrecking all the stuff that I already put up by just saying, well, we're giving you new stuff. And so, there's new benefits, but those also come with, different costs, namely that outposts are destructible, or citadels are destructible.
Right, they're kind of putting it through like a transitionary period where, both will exist, as you said, and they're kind of redundant, and then they'll start phasing out the old stuff into the new, right?
That's what I gather from it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. I mean, like I said, I don't play EVE anymore, really, and I certainly don't play in nullsec much anymore. But the images they post up, and also from on Twitter, it's pretty cool looking stuff. So I mean, even if just for the eye candy, you guys should check it out. It's pretty neat. I mean, they were showing some size comparisons of how big these things are compared to planets and whatnot. So I can go on a pipe dream and think how cool it would be to have an infantry battle on one of these things, because they are freaking huge, which is very cool looking.
About the size of Long Island.
The one they posted like yesterday, I think, with the extra large citadel, they kind of showed it floating over Earth, and it was like, holy crap,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
They
They've got
showed,
Titan Doomsday, or not Titan, but yeah, Doomsday weapons on the structures themselves.
that's pretty awesome. I mean, the size comparison of like the Amar Avatar Titan docking, it was like, oh wow, that's a big freaking building, because I mean the Titans in EVE are about 16, 17 kilometers long, and the Titan looked like a little twig next to this structure. It was very cool looking. So I will praise CCP, as I usually do, on their visuals and creating a really cool looking environment in all of their games, really. So it looks like in our thread on the forum, somebody wanted to talk about EVE-style E-War. I mean, we won't go too crazy with this, but Velocid from OSG Planetary Operations posted requesting that we kind of talk about a couple things like neutralizers, webs, ECM flashbangs, target painters, etc. Yeah, so again, this is kind of a pipe dream. It's probably not something within the scope of what we can actually do in Dust currently, but it might be worth kind of talking about for fun. So yeah, so I know that some of you out there are kind of big into logistics or scouts and E-War and whatnot. So I mean, what sort of things would you find useful and interesting to shake up the E-War meta a bit, other than just scanning and whatnot?
With the web tanks would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always maintained that one of the major issues with tank and vehicle and in AV and whatnot is that right now it's pretty much either I have enough DPS to drop him before he gets away, or I don't. And that kind of is where the meta ends in terms of that dynamic, and the lack of tools available it makes it, kind of problematic. I think you could have a lot more dynamics and interesting things with that. So like a web would be like a mine that they would go over, and the thing would go off and slow them down and give you time to actually DPS them down.
Sorry, are we talking about Eve or Dust?
Bringing EVE mechanics into Dust, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if this is exactly right, but and what I would like to see happen with scanners is for some changes to the statistics on them, so that I was motivated to use some scanner other than just the two that I normally use, which is like the focused and the Creodron. So I have one scanner that does 200 meter scan, and another that can pick up almost anything, and I barely use any other scanners because there's just no other scanners with competitive statistics in my brain.
Well, and that comes down to an ongoing issue that we've talked about before with a lot of equipment. For one, the progression is extremely messy, and two, there's often cases where there is one that is just simply better in almost every way than everything else.
Equipment definitely needs a pass of fixing there's lots of redundancies. There's variants that are really not necessary at all. They have no purpose. They're not used. So either they need to be removed or fixed. I think we could do with a whole lot less variants for most equipment. But yeah, they definitely need a pass. And I mean, I know Cross has been working on it before, and I'm helping him on that when there's a chance for us to actually get that looked at by more than just us. But yeah, definitely needs to be done.
Yeah, when I was writing the equipment guide for the Biomassed blog, and I was just kind of talking with Cross as I was writing it, and there was a lot of swearing and me throwing my hands up because the information I was pulling, from the database and whatnot to assemble all the information, I was like, "What? This is all crazy. Like, it's no consistency whatsoever to really any of it. It's all over the place in terms of variants and which variants are available at which tier or for what currency or whatnot. It's a total mess." And I mean, that's certainly something that having people on the CPM like Zaria and Cross is great for, because unfortunately it's a lot of busy work, which CCP doesn't like to do because it's expensive without much gain. But it is something that people who are very knowledgeable and who use that equipment all the time and whatnot, it's a perfect thing that they can work on and really help hash out. So I appreciate you guys working on that, because it is a mess, and as I go a little crazy when I see something that's a really messy design, and in this case it's driving me nuts because it's painful to look at the table when you kind of see how everything is laid out and there's no thought or reason behind it whatsoever.
Here.
Preaching to the choir, I'm sure, but again, we do appreciate it, because I do feel that equipment in particular is something that really needs to be taken a look at, especially like we said, for tools available and whatnot.
And I mean, I spend a lot of time head desking over when the carried amounts were changed.
Oh yes.
The fuck ups in that, I spend so much time. I'm like, Cross, why fix it now? But yeah, it's sometimes it's I don't get how it can be that big of a mess, considering that it should be fairly simple. But yeah, I think we don't need that many variants. I mean, there's really no reason for there to be that many variants at the proto level specifically. We get a lot of completely underutilized simply because the purpose that they seem to exist for is not an actual use case. So why should they exist?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's just taking up space of things that need to be handled by servers and whatnot, and loading redundant crap potentially. It's not good. So, hopefully that's something that we can work on definitely as a community, and something I would encourage you to reach out to certainly there's many individuals out in the community that are willing to help kind of process and go through all of that data and find out what actually is necessary and whatnot, and help organize, because I think it's something that should happen. I just don't really feel it's something that CCP is going to be particularly interested in focusing on in the near future, and I think it should be handled fairly soon, because it has gone untouched for quite a while now.
Well, yeah, I will poke Cross about his epic spreadsheet of doom, and seeing if we can get a few more people to kind of chisel the unnecessary fat away with us, or
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
have you make a new one.
I kind of helped make the one he has now, but
I know you did.
but yeah, no, it's good stuff, and it's something certainly worth looking at. On the topic of equipment specifically, is there anything else that you guys would be interested in, specifically stuff that might be a little more feasible and that can actually be done?
Are you meaning like new equipment, or changing the ones that exist drastically, or
Just
I still want shield support tools.
yeah.
The shield support equipment. I've I've been hoping and waiting, for a long time for something to be done about that. But yeah, I think it needs to exist on it, not a pure like a mirror of the armor ones, because I think that would be stupid, because they shouldn't be identical. But yeah, shield support equipment should exist in the game, and the fact that it doesn't yet is just bizarre to me.
Well, especially since, like, we see in EVE where the primary function of logistics ships is always repping, and then their secondary bonuses they get, which is, more unique to the racial type. The fact that there is only armor, yet it applies to only one of the logistics suits and one that is typically more shield-based is asinine, in my opinion. I'd love to get both in there so you can actually kind of rework those logistics bonuses and give them the properly matching tools. I won't go too crazy into the lore and making things match, but that is another pet peeve of mine that I wish we could see resolved. And like you said, I hope it won't be something as, I'll say, lazy as just copying the armor repair tool and slapping it onto shields, because that would actually, I think, cause some serious issues in terms of gameplay. But it is something that I think should be a priority, definitely, for the future of the support class in general. I know one thing that Rattati was throwing around in the Skype channel was talking about using nanite injectors on friendlies that are currently alive to provide some sort of bonus or whatnot. I thought that was kind of interesting, that was something, at the very least in his mind, was something worth pursuing in terms of feasibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the only context I've seen the idea thrown about. But I mean, it certainly has merit, and it's something that's worth brainstorming, I think.
I just want to say that the nanite injector is my least favorite piece of equipment.
I mainly stopped carrying one simply because no one ever asked for a revive. I mean, even people in my squad, they just go, "I don't care. I'm just gonna bleed out," because they didn't care about the suit or the clone. So I mean, I very rarely carry one anymore because it seems entirely pointless. No one wants a revive ever.
Well, especially when respawning is typically as easy as it is in the game with uplinks and whatnot. It's often better tactically to just respawn, because you know where you're going to come out. You know that there's probably not going to be someone pointing at your corpse when you stand up. So I think that like you said, the nanite injector is probably one of the least utilized pieces of equipment right now, because it doesn't have a whole lot of benefit compared to other equipment out there right now. So I think that giving it perhaps some additional functionality to encourage people to actually use it and carry it would be good, because like you said, we don't want redundant equipment, because if it's not really being used ever, it's not worth having in the game.
Well, I mean, simply because while I wholeheartedly I understand why the change is made to people having to ask for a revive, I think it caused quite a lot of problems on the other side of the coin. Then when you'd act, because so few people would ask for revives, more and more people would just stop using nanite injectors altogether. And then when you actually want a revive, there's usually no nanite injectors anywhere to be seen. But I mean, yeah, giving them some sort of a utility that isn't completely tied to someone allowing you to use it would be good, I think.
Well, I mean, when needles were when you couldn't decline needles, that was really bad. Like, we don't want to go back to that.
No, and like
No.
I said, I fully understand why the change was made. I just think it should have been, because it's not a question of declining the needle being used. You're not declining a revive. You are refusing to be offered one. It would be one thing if I, as a logi, could go, this is a perfectly safe time for me to stick this person with a needle. There's no red dot shooting right now, and yeah, I'll just stick them with a needle, and then they can go, no, I actually want to respawn anyway. That would be fine.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
It's the actual declining or accepting the revive, but the fact that they have to ask for it, and a lot of the time people, I mean, I still get like people going like in my squad, like, why ask for a revive? I cleared the area, I'm standing over you with a needle, just freaking ask for a revive. And they're like, oh, I forgot. I'm like, yeah, okay, well, that's great. But I mean, that's why it's pointless to carry a needle, because no one ever asks for a revive. If they got offered one, they could choose, but yeah.
Well, and there's a big percentage of kills that are just clone terminated anyway.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But still, I mean, that's not nearly all of them. A lot of people will just choose to. I mean, I do it. I'll just go for like, fuck this. I'm just gonna respawn, because I'm not gonna wait here for 15 seconds just in case a needle happens to wander by, because most likely it's not going to, because no one carries needles anymore.
Yeah,
No,
and I
I'm
think
not bitter about that at all.
clearly, no, not at all. But I think that's fair. That change. While see, I personally never had an issue with the no acceptance thing, like just forcing people to stand up. Aside from some, boosting applications, I thought that was fine. But everyone was crying about,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to lose my KDR. And I'm like, who gives a shit, But that's just
I
me
mean,
personally.
honestly, I think that was part of the game back when it. I mean, it's not even a question of ISK not mattering so much, because so many people just have such excess ISK that they don't care. You used to care about clones. I mean, and somewhat like it felt like. I mean, I think over the years, cause it used to be, you'd win a skirmish, but if you won it by like one clone, you almost got cloned out. That was like, holy shit! Don't let that happen again, because you don't want it to be that close. You actually cared about the clone count as well, and I think most people just don't. They just go for the kills, and they'll just run in there. Particularly acquisition, where it doesn't matter, clone count doesn't matter, but that kind of that mindset. You watch a team just get cloned by, they just rush in and get killed, and they might go positive, they'll get 2 kills before they die, but they just go in and just keep dying over and over again, and just bleeding clones, and then they lose because they get cloned and nobody gives a shit. And I wish I had that, like, wish more people had that mentality that we used to have in Chrome, where you didn't lose clones unless you had to, because it was a matter of pride or whatever. But I mean, every clone mattered.
Well, it's true, because I think, like you said,
my God.
ISK is no longer a thing. I think that, especially with so many BPOs floating around and people being so rich, they don't care about dying, because there's not much loss involved, or at least not loss they care about. And so, screw it. I'll just go in and get my kills and whatnot. Whereas before, if people were getting pounded at an objective, they would just stop going for that objective because they were losing money. And like you said, people cared more about clones back then, because you got cloned out a lot more frequently. But you even see it now, where you'll have a team, and I've been on both the receiving and giving end of this, where a team is playing the objective extremely well, but the other side basically just bleeds them dry. Even though they're losing horribly on the MCC battle, they just they slaughter them. It's a meat grinder in there, and you don't even necessarily have to. I mean, that is a tactic in a way, where you would lure people into the city, and only hold a couple objectives in there, but you would lure them in to come get the objectives, and then just mulch them and clone them out, because they just keep, hammering the same spot over and over again, and never actually thinking, oh, we're actually going to lose if we keep doing this, even though we're getting kills.
The number of people who just never look at, like, they just don't actually look at the situation at all. I mean, people just don't play smart anymore, and it's painful. I mean, I can totally understand. Sometimes you just go into that mindset of just, push, 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 and, try to do something, and you just don't realize that you're getting cloned. But over and over again, and it just feels like, where did all the good players go?
Well, this is why faction warfare is just. Sorry, the game right now, faction warfare is way better than pubs in my mind right now.
Oh, it has been. It has been for a while. I mean, my problem with faction is that it's still so. Even if the teams are better on average and more tactically minded on average and more actually trying to win on average, they're still very often totally lopsided. So
I actually find that my problem with that pubs are the really lopsided game mode right now. I mean, today I got really lucky. I didn't get any black screens, so I got a lot of pubs in, and I had one like early in the morning, which I posted, which I had a really good comeback on, and I was basically doing like a big part of my team's work. Like I was doing all the links. I got like the comeback hacks and all that stuff, and but yeah, way too often in pubs it's just so lopsided that there's
Mhm.
just nothing to be done. There's nothing to be done, And
I
then in
mean,
faction warfare, I get close games. I've got all the faction warfare games I've done have been close. Almost all the pubs I did today have been totally lopsided, and you lose half the players on the losing team halfway through.
I guess I just experienced just happens to be different. I mean, for a long time, faction was the one where you actually got good battles, but I mean, over time, it has. Not saying there aren't the occasional good battle. Obviously, there are. I wouldn't play factional at all anymore if it wasn't. But people go and you have the Q syncs and you have the big, big squads that are, do it like that's all they do. They do 8 hours of faction a day. They always do the same thing because it wins. So they're, they have it, perfect and they just do it every time and it works. And in a pub, I feel even though I would like to play something other than Dom, it just doesn't happen if I'm playing pubs because that's nobody has the patience to wait for any of the other game modes if they ever do pop up. So it's just Dom. But I actually feel that generally speaking, even if it starts lopsided and it looks lopsided, in a pub, I as one person have more of a chance of actually making a difference than I do in a factional against an 8-man squad. Even if I'm in a squad myself, but it still feels like, in a pub, one person can actually make much more of a difference than in a factional. If you're starting on the losing team in a factional, you're guaranteed to lose. There's almost no changing it back at some point. Whereas in a pub, you can turn it around. That's just my personal experience, but I mean, it obviously varies.
I think you're correct in that, but at the same time, I think that in general, Dust suffers from a very bad problem where it often feels like once it gets to a certain point, you have no chance of turning it around just by the way the game is flowing. And when that happens, the player morale pretty much tanks, and that's when you see people just backing out and saying "screw it," or they go and snipe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's really a massive underlying problem. Is that as a player, it often gets to a point where I like to play tactically. I play with the group. You try to play smart and turn things around, but even I feel like I get to a point where I'm like, what's the point? Like we're gonna lose anyways. I'll keep trying. But I understand that most people aren't like that. Like once they feel like it's pointless, they're not going to try.
See, the problem is the people. I mean, that's fine. That's just part of human nature. I mean, at some point, you just see, you see, there's no point. You can't win this anymore. I mean, you can keep going, but you can't win this anymore. So that cuts off a lot of people who just go there. Why am I wasting my assets? It's the people who will in the first 30 seconds who hacks the point first. If the enemy team hacks the point first, they just stop. They're done. If their team manages to hack the point first, then they're, all for it. Let's go and redline the enemy team. But if the enemy team gets to the points first, they just instantly give up. And I mean, in the first 30 seconds, in the first minute of the battle. That's what I hate about Dust and the community, because there's so many people playing this game who will instantly give up if they're not if it doesn't look like they're going to win from the very beginning of the battle, they don't ever leave the red line. So yeah.
And that's indicative of a very risk-adverse community, which makes sense because the game is built around risk, and they don't want to lose what they have, so they play it safe if they feel like their chances of losing what they have is very high, which in the case of where the enemy team starts to get the upper hand, people go, oh, well, shit, I don't want to lose it, I'll just, play it safe and hang back, which just snowballs into, the big problem that we see where, once you get ahead, you cannot turn it around, often because of the way the gameplay plays out and often because people just give up. And so that comes to the very difficult question of how do you, manipulate the player psyche to still feel like they have a chance and want to get in there and do something while at the same time, not bringing in really weird mechanics and whatnot that are going to make the game not perform the way you want. So, the hard part is how are we going to make people want to keep trying even when the odds are stacked against them? And it's a difficult question. I'm not sure what solution would make sense in the context of the style of game that Dust currently is.
Well, I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to come up with some kind of incentive for, playing the underdog team. I mean, it's got to be an SP boost or something we can come up with.
Well,
yeah, that's what you have in Planetside too, isn't it? If you're outnumbered, you have a XP bonus. You gain search faster. I mean, something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be that exactly, but something like that.
Yeah, I mean that could be worthwhile. I mean, something that's gonna, the player's gonna go, well, I'm behind, but if I push now, I'll benefit from it, even if the result is not a win. I will still get something out of trying to get in there and do something, because if you can slow that snowball and start let's say pushing it back up the hill, even if you don't get over the crest of that hill, you're still going to create a more competitive game. Because I mean, it's just as boring to get redline as it is to redline somebody. I mean, how many matches have you had where you're literally sitting punching your friend in the face because you have nothing else to do because the enemy team is sitting in their MCC?
Yeah.
I mean, hell, I remember back in the beta when spawn points were fixed in the red line and not behind cover. You'd sit there with a missile tank and shoot people as they materialize out of thin air. It was bad,
Surely you never did such a horrible thing. Surely.
Of course not. But at the same time, it was either that or punch my friend in the back of the head, in some corner of the map. It was just bad, and redlining is bad for everybody. It's not fun for anybody when it happens. So again, we need to do something that's going to encourage people to try, even if they aren't going to necessarily get a win out of it.
Indeed.
I mean, do you guys think it's too much if we start handicapping a team when they pull way ahead?
I wouldn't provide any negative reinforcement in that
Right.
regard. I think you should offer the underdog, we'll call them, some incentive to try. I don't think necessarily a direct buff would be good, like an actual in-battle buff, but something that they're going to say, well, I'm going to make a profit if I do this, if I keep pushing. So I wouldn't affect the actual battle. That gets into real dangerous territory, and people gaming the system to get things they really shouldn't.
What about like a war point buff or something, like war point earning buff for the underdog? Because right now the way it's stacked is whoever if you have the letter, you're actually getting a buff for defending the point, which makes a lot of sense in skirmish, because you don't want full skirmish. There's always a problem with board players leaving points because they don't want to wait like the 1 minute or whatever for the red dot to show up and try and take it. But in domination, you have whatever team is ahead is now earning more war points, than whoever the underdog is, because they're getting, whatever defense points, objective defense points on top of whatever they're earning. So I don't know, maybe the underdogs need something to balance that out.
In the purpose of that would be to gain orbitals faster, or what are you getting at with the warbarge?
Oh, it would be a whole thing. You could get orbitals faster. They would be rewarded with more ISK and SP at the end of the match. So it would be like a total It would end up being a combination of all those things.
Yeah, the thing I worry about is people intentionally throwing the game to make a bigger profit than they would have if they had just won. That's the really tricky balancing part there, is you don't want to incentivize it too much where they're going to go, oh, well, I'm just going to sit in the red line and lose on purpose so I
Well-
can get a better bonus out of it.
Well, I mean, honestly, my personal preference, which I know isn't terribly constructive, my personal preference would be that there should be an incentive to win. As in, if you lose, you get fuck all, and if you win, you actually get rewarded. So better try and win. But I
Well,
mean, I know it's
that's what we have in FAC War right now,
yeah, and I mean,
and it is a good incentive. People
people
try harder in that
actually
mode.
try to win in factional. That's the thing. People don't go there to just kind of fuck around. I mean, some do, but I mean, overall, people actually want to win those battles. Pubs, nobody cares except the tryhard. I'm a tryhard. I know it. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, the only thing, of course, that you worry about is that if people get to a stage where they think, oh, I'm not going to win, and there's probably no chance of me turning this around, then they're going to say, screw it, just leave
do
early.
it already.
Well,
I mean,
I
they
know
do
we're
it
trying to stop that,
anyway.
though.
I know, but that's the thing. I like I said, it's not terribly constructive. That's just my personal, I wish the world worked that way. I know it doesn't, but I wish it did. It's
Well,
the
I-
whole, why are we rewarding people for losing?
Well, I think it's fair that winning should certainly be much more rewarding than losing. In pubs, maybe not a whole 100% zero, like you say. Well, that's up for discussion, but I think that's fine. It's just a matter of giving. Maybe I'll go back on what I said before, in that giving people an incentive or at least a benefit that will help them make a comeback could be a good thing. So, like Heracles said, a warbarge bonus or warpoint bonus rather to get more orbitals to help push in faster. If you're behind, and that would obviously scale. That if you're really behind, it would help a lot. That actually might have some merit.
I mean, there's I think there's two components to this that kind of might help. I don't know if that's in any it should be introduced to Dust or not, but for instance, when the battle is at a point where the computer can calculate there is literally zero chance for the other team to win this anymore. The battle should just not drag on for another 5-10 minutes. But I mean that's in Dust. It's kind of hard to calculate that because it's not just a question of MCC. I mean, the number of times where you've won a game by cloning the enemy team out, even though they held the points for the entire battle, it's possible. It's entirely possible. But I mean, some sort of because the red line matches, the fact that they last so goddamn long without anything happening, that's the problem. So I was kind of toying with this idea in my mind. I mean, this would work in skirmish. Some other variation might work in the dom, but in skirmish, if the enemy, if the winning team holds all points, there could be some sort of a cooldown after which one of them undetermined flips over to the losing side because of whatever bullshit lore, virus, blah blah blah, thingy. You can come up with some sort of an excuse for it, to give them a stepping stone. I don't know if that's even sensible. It's just kind of been something I've been thinking about.
Well, they even have that in Destiny now. That's recently they added the mercy rule, where basically it calculates that if there is a differential in score that occurs in a short enough time period that the match just instantly ends. Like, you're getting your ass kicked so hard that it just says, okay, yep, you're done. And they call the game right there and then it's over. And I think that, that's in Dust, if it was properly calculated, that if the game detects that there is no chance that you are going to turn this around, like you are getting beaten so badly that, that it's not going to happen, that they should just call an end to it and be done, rather than having this painful, like I said, red lines are boring. Either you're sitting in your MCC playing cards, or you're punching your buddy in the back of the head down the field, because it's terrible. So I think that's certainly something to consider. Like you said before, more incentive for winning is certainly important, so people actually want to win. And then I think another component is giving people the means, or at least encouraging them to try to turn it around and give them the tools they need to actually turn it around, because currently it does snowball quite badly in many cases, and we need to lessen that effect. That really needs to be a key feature in improving the overall gameplay.
No, I like Zaria's idea.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty solid, as long as it actually makes sense and it doesn't, cut off games that really could be turned around. I think that's great. And like I said, in Destiny, it's nice because there are matches where it's like, okay, come on, we're done. We don't need this to go on any longer. The outcome's already clear. So I think that's certainly fair and something that should be looked into.
But I mean, we should have an idea for Dom as well, because I mean, it's like we've said, like 90% of pub matches are Dom.
Yeah, and then unfortunately that's kind of a snowball effect as well, is that, if it's difficult to get into the other game modes, people will play Dom because they want to get into a game quickly, which then means that more Dom matches are spinning up, which means more slots are opening, which means that the matchmaker is going to want to stick you in Dom. So, that is problematic as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have had numerous instances where I've purposely taken Dom out of the rotation, so I'm not, my eyes don't bleed from too much Dom. And sometimes it works great, like on a day like today, Sunday, where the population's up a bit. It works great because I could get other matches and not feel repetitive. But if you're in like some odd hour on a weekday and you try to do that, get ready for a 7-minute wait.
7? Sweetheart.
10, whatever.
Yeah, I usually get Scotty twice before I get into a battle if I try to queue anything but Dom. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
I find that interesting because I personally do not have issues getting into matches fairly quickly, even when I do take Dom out of the rotation. But I know that others have the exact opposite, where they basically can't get into a match.
I mean, at time of the day, I'm sure you play during the absolute peak hours, though.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I'm like right after work, North America time, so it's probably when people are all on. So I mean, it certainly makes sense. One thing that they could consider that I know that Mag did back in the day is that if a game mode was starting to slip into being less popular, they would apply a XP bonus to that game mode to encourage people to actually play that over other ones, which actually worked to pretty good effect.
That would be
the
amazing.
Dom people. Punish them.
Well, not punish, but I mean, if you log in, it goes, hey, you're going to get time and a half SP for playing anything other than Dom. People are going to go, oh, okay, and they'll play something that isn't Dom.
Oh, that would be glorious. I hope Ritati's listening, man.
I mean, particularly if you underline it, play anything but Dom. Anything at all. Anything.
Yeah,
Just
and
not
it actually
Dom.
worked. It worked really well in balancing the game modes because the developers could go in and on the fly tweak it and go, okay, well, this one's going to be, times 256 experience for this game mode or whatever, and they could push the players, not force them, but they could encourage them to go certain ways, and then allow them to kind of fine tune and tweak what people were playing by offering incentives. I think that's something that they could certainly consider, an ISK bonus or an SP bonus or something like that, and make it a little less painful, and hopefully kind of stop the snowball effect we're seeing in terms of how things are queuing.
Kind of like how WoW does things with queues for dungeons and raids and stuff like that, is when they're low on tanks or healers. They never get low on DPS, obviously. So, but at different times they'll offer either tanks, healers, or both an incentive to play. An extra bonus for queuing is that. So very much the same way, people are maybe encouraged to try rolling more tanks and healers because it's kind of an easier path now.
Yeah, absolutely. They do that in Final Fantasy as well, and I actually trained a healer specifically because it was such a pain to queue as a DPS for a dungeon, so I trained a healer so I could do dungeons, get the items needed, and then use the items to get gear for my DPS class instead. Because
the fun part is also you can kick the DPS really easily if you don't like them, because you'll fill the spot fast.
Oh yeah.
You can't kick your tank though.
The DPS are always very polite when they're in dungeon because they've been sitting there for 45 minutes, trying to get in against everybody else. So, absolutely. But yeah, I think encouraging certain game modes, and I think that's probably something that is fairly feasible within the realm of something they could do. It's I'm obviously no coder, so I'm making a broad assumption here, but I think that's probably something that's fairly easy to figure out.
I think it's not even the coding that probably is not a big deal. I think what we might run into a wall here is localization. The actual message going, "Hey guys, if you play something anything but dumb today, you'll get more, SB for it." That part, localizing that to the different versions of the client in different languages, that might be the stonewall.
Jeez. Another way they could also handle it is offer up daily missions for playing specific game modes to encourage people to go a certain way. 'Cause, I mean, that system's already been localized, right?
True.
So I mean,
But they would still have to localize the message that says, because they've never done it for certain game modes before, so they'd still have to localize the message that says,
True.
I mean, and it's one of those things that it only needs to be done once, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But it's sometimes the things you think really shouldn't be that big of a deal, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, we're not even talking like big item descriptions here. It's literally like one sentence that goes, "Hey, go do this," and you're done. But like you said, that obviously the political climate and the allocation of resources within the company for this project is in a very weird place right now. So it would be understandable if that was problematic, but I do hope that they can figure something out, because I think that would help a lot. Okay, guys. Well, we're a little over the hour mark here. Is there any other topics you guys wanted to touch on before we call it quits here for the day?
How are you guys liking that breach assault rifle on a gal assault?
Well, I always liked it. It's kind of crazy now. It doesn't sound like a breach anymore, that's for sure.
I am really enjoying going back to the regular assault rifle though, because it's actually, I mean, obviously the breach is better, but I never really gave a shit about that. I'm really enjoying the regular assault rifle right now on the gal assault, obviously.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Sorry, I just feel like vindicated on my opinion on the breach assault rifle, because I was using it for a long time before the gal assault, and I thought it was a pretty good weapon, and most of the player base didn't seem to recognize that it was actually a great rifle, and now everybody's using it. So I feel like a hipster. I was doing it before it was cool.
Well, I mean, did you miss that period of, what was it, in the spring? When was that? When the breach AR was, everyone on the, every non-AR user on the forums was crying about how it was so OP and needed to be nerfed to, death. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when the breach AR had its last flavor of the month period, but its ammo capacity was reduced, and suddenly suddenly it was back into obscurity again for some reason. No, I mean, it was definitely of the AR family. It was the best. I mean, it performed the best. It definitely was. Well, it was the only one that was even close to being on par with the other racial rifles. So now it's better than it was, because on the gal assault, as they all are. But I like the fact that the regular AR actually feels usable now. So I mean, pros and cons.
Yeah, I think people recognized very early on that the breach was pretty much superior to the normal AR, simply because its stability and the way it fired allowed you to use it at a greater range, which was always the issue with the AR, is that it just went all over the place. So I think that, people recognize that. And like Zaria said, it actually for a while was considered OP as hell, and they nerfed the hell out of the magazine size to bring it more in line with the other rifles, which, it mixed feelings about that. I've always liked the ARs, but, that's the way it is. But yeah, I think it's, again, I like the change. I wish that some of that bonus had gone to the base weapon itself rather than entirely to one suit.
I agree. Absolutely. I think it should have gone to the weapon and not the Aelns Dene assault. I felt that same way about the rail rifle as well. It should have, the actual rail rifle should have been looked at, not the Caldari assault. But I mean, the ARs needed it way more.
Rail rifles are in a pretty good place.
Yeah, they are. I mean, the Caldari assault definitely needed something, but I think the shield changes were that something. I didn't think they really needed a secondary bonus, but I mean, neither did the Galente Assault. The Galente Assault was already in a good place. It wasn't in a good place with an AR. The Galente Assault was in a great place with a rail rifle. Now it's actually, very good with its actual intended rifle, but I think it should have been the rifle that got buffed, not the suit.
Yeah, and I would have been happy with just like a hybrid change, like maybe like 5% of the rifle and 10% of the suit, just something to bring that weapon up a little bit on non-assault suits. I mean, I'm all for racial matching. I think that's fantastic, but I mean, you can stick a combat rifle on any suit, and it'll perform pretty damn well. You can stick an AR on any suit, and it doesn't perform that well. So
But
I think that something to help it would have been good.
The min assault bonus doesn't actually change the DPS of the combat rifle.
Right.
I mean, you have a larger magazine, so your sustained DPS, is increased slightly because of the, having to reload slightly less. But I mean, still, it doesn't actually affect the damage application, whereas the Galente Assault bonus very much affects the damage application of the weapon. So, I mean, there's a massive difference there.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it did feel like a step in the right direction, though.
I had mixed feelings about it. I was never really a fan of having it be a direct DPS buff, but at the same time, I have yet to come up with a really good bonus for the Galente Assault. So, if this is the best that everyone can come up with, then, I guess that's what it's going to be. In terms of the Caldari with the rail rifle, I think that was spot on. The recoil reduction made perfect sense to me, so I'm glad to see that.
It's starting to make my heavy feel a little redundant, though, because I don't know, heavies don't seem to have that much of an edge over assaults like they used to.
Well, yes and no. I mean, you have
they're
few
great
more
for
options
AV.
as a heavy.
They're
Exactly.
they're the kings of AV right now. But in terms of comparing an HMG heavy to a Gal Assault, they can Gal Assault is looking pretty attractive compared to my Amar heavy these days. Oh, just overall.
Well, I mean, still,
Yes and no.
if you put the Galente Assault in front of the Amar heavy, the AR gets a bonus against shields, whereas the HMG gets a bonus against armor. I mean, on paper, the Amar heavy still wins hands down. Then it's up to player ability, rather than just equations. But I sure can say that heavies still destroy logis.
Oh god, of course, everything destroys logis. Let's be honest here.
Yeah. Sad face.
But I think you're right, though, in that the heavies certainly offer up a lot more AV options. I mean, if you look at all of the commando bonuses, and I've harped on this before, everything about them says sustained heavy DPS, and the two light weapons allows them to use light AV and not be useless against infantry at the same time. And then, of course, with the Sentinels, you've got the Forge Gun and the Assault HMG, which are both AV weapons and in various applications can be used against infantry as well. So in terms of dropping vehicles, heavy suits are definitely on top. And I think that's where they should be. That was where kind of the original intention was. I mean, even if you read the old flavor text on the Sentinel before Commandos even existed, they talk about it being the only suit that can go head to head with the vehicle and, be successful. And while that's not entirely true, that does kind of seem to be their original intention, that they were meant to be the AV kings and still have, limited ability against infantry, and where the assault suits, I think, are getting to a point where they are extremely good at wrecking infantry, and they really don't have a ton going for them in terms of AV. I mean, for example, the rate of fire bonus on the Galente Assault does not affect the plasma cannon, so that's not going to help them there, but it does help them with the assault rifle, obviously, which is in anti-infantry only. So I think that, like you said, in many regards, it's going in a pretty good direction. I like the shift of heavy towards more AV and the mediums more towards anti-infantry. I think that's a great place, and I'm glad to see that change is happening, at least in many degrees. Anything else, guys, before we call it the close here?
One thing here, the Crimson Harvest Kill event has definitely brought out a lot more Agamis mass drivers and jumpy mass drivers at that, and it's been a little frustrating to deal with. But there's been some discussion in the forums of possibly like a solution to that is getting rid of the blue bottles and switching that to an equipment slot that would kind of behave in a similar way to the cloak, where you activate it and then you have like a 20-30 second period where you can use both your increased jumps and increased melee. And if you swap out of that, you have like a 10-second recharge delay that you have to deal with. So you get like one tactical jump, and if you switch back to a weapon during that jump, you wouldn't be able to jump again for another few seconds.
That would be so glorious.
Yeah, absolutely. I would support that 100%. I've never had an issue with the high jumping. I had an issue with it being something that they can do anytime on a whim, mid-fight, and that's what affects the gameplay in a negative way, in my opinion. And forcing it to be more deliberate, where something you're going to stop and activate and then use for a period of time and then have a cooldown where you can't use it, is exactly what it should be. Not this, I can bounce around like a rabbit all day long because, my stamina and jump height are, maxed out.
Yeah, making it an actual tactical tool.
And in that case, I'd actually be okay with, because I know they reduced the number of bottles you could fit from 5 to 3 to kind of rein in the height, because it was getting pretty ridiculous. But I think that if it was indeed an active equipment, like you said, like the cloak, I would be okay with a very high jump. I think that's fine because it's something that, is deliberate. It's not in the middle of a firefight you're going to be doing.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, too, it would be nice to have like 2 variations of jump height while you have that equipment out. So like while you have it normally out, you jump like 50% higher, but then when you have it out and then you push down X, you charge up a jump or something like that.
Or a longer duration, because I think it certainly has merit in something that's a more reasonable jump height, but it lasts longer, because if you're, going from point A to point B and you can, jump over small obstacles like boxes and whatnot, and that's all you need, I think that's much more reasonable. And then if you want, a short burst where you're flying up, to the second story, that's fine too, but it's not going to last as long. I think that.
I mean, the only thing I would have I would be slightly sad about switching the whole utility of the blue bottles over to equipment is the fact that I think the utility you get from putting one myotip on to countermand the counteract the movement penalties you get from using an armor plate. So you can have a heavy that isn't completely destroyed by a tiny little ledge, that you can actually navigate.
Yeah,
the
thank
maps.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Great point.
Buff the jump height in general without the blue bottles.
Yes,
absolutely. Exactly. That would absolutely need to happen, because I think right now the fact that you can do I mean my min commando needs one blue bottle to not be stuck on anything and everything simply because it's a heavy suit. Even though I'm not using regular plates, I still can't jump over stuff that I should be able to just walk over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be a horrible bad thing to return back to, not having that utility. So yeah, something would need to be done about that.
I have a Galente heavy with 2 blue bottles, just so I'm not like crippled when I need to hop over a tiny little ledge in some weird corner of the map.
Yeah, you should not have to have a dedicated module just so you can go over a 6-inch lip. That's ridiculous. It's like I was playing the other day, and I was in, granted, a fairly heavily armored heavy suit, and my brother's watching me, and I walk up to like one of those open-ended boxes where it's just kind of like a tube, and I could not get over the ledge. And he's like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the reality of it. Is that I have one too many armor plates, and I can't step up a 6-inch lip to get over this thing." So, I think buffing, and I said that when the Myothims first came out, that I would have rather seen just a slight increase in the jump height for most, if not all, the suits, especially the heavies, just to make it a little less painful to move around. I mean, I'm not looking to vault over railings with a heavy, but I should be able to at least move around in a reasonable fashion, even if I am packing a lot of armor and whatnot. So I think that's certainly a great change to push forward. But yeah, so I think we're going to move into shoutouts, guys. We're getting close to an hour and a half here, so, and I have to get going, and I think Zell wants to eat dinner at some hour tonight, so we'll move into shoutouts.
Eventually, food is nice.
Yes, food is good. So we'll start at the top of the list again with Sarai. Zell, do you have any shoutouts, man?
Star Citizen released a patch. I'm gonna try it later. We'll see if it's any good. It's probably not, but you know.
Okay. Darth?
Shout out to the people that are doing this event, despite how grindy it is. Let your voices be heard, and hopefully we can get a more all-inclusive event in the future.
Yep, that's certainly fair. Heracles?
My shout out goes to CCP Frame. This weekend on my YouTube, I released the Crimson Harvest Dust 514 edition, which was my first ever attempt at making Dust 514 mesh. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Machinima, and CCP Frame retweeted it and gave me a compliment on my intro. So thanks you very much, Frame, for doing that.
Awesome. Jadek?
Shout out to Heracles for letting me participate as the forward field commander officer.
Oh, I loved having you on. Thanks for participating, Jadek.
That was fun.
Very cool. I'll take a look at that. All right, Zaria?
Shout out to Dagger and Akomi Cypher being annoying pests that, ask me for things that I can't do, but, you're not getting the contact grenades buffed, at least not by anything I do, so, love you guys.
Fantastic. And I'm going to give my shout out to everybody that's been putting up with my ranting the last few weeks. We always joke around the Skype channel that I have a special gun, Pokey's Boundless Optimism gun, as I, despite being surrounded by bitterness, have continued to maintain that I am hopeful for the future of Dust and hope that, we see some news in the near future about, where this game is going and what's going on. And I get very frustrated and get into grumpy moods where I kind of throw a fit, and because I'm very frustrated, and I've ranted about this on the show before, but I'm very frustrated with the way things are going. And it's an important thing to me and to the community, and despite my Boundless Optimism gun, I often recently have been getting disgruntled and discouraged because of the silence, and even I reaching my limit of how much ammo is in my Boundless Optimism gun. So thanks for everyone putting up with me, and hopefully we get something soon, and I appreciate everyone that cheers me up, tells me to keep going, because I think that a lot of people are in the same situation where they're very frustrated and having a hard time with the way things are going. So hopefully something happens soon, because it's important. I mean, I know that whatever power to be in CCP is causing said silence, it may not be as important to them, or it may not be something that they're willing to do right now, but it is taxing the community, and I think that it's time. I think it's time that things start going in a direction of more transparency and letting people know that CCP is as devoted to this franchise as the players have been devoted to this franchise, because despite all the shit that has happened, people are still hanging in there, and I think that that should be rewarded one way or another, and I think that they deserve it, and hopefully communication opens up very soon. So that being said, guys, I want to thank you for joining us for Biomassed episode 77, and we will bring this one to a close. So thank you and have a good night.